So, what's a switch off game, you might ask? Let me set the scene. You've just come home from work and you're pretty tired, yet you go straight to your phone and doom scroll until your brain becomes overstimulated. Then you think, I should fix this, and assume that if you go play a game, that'll take your mind off things, or at least start to fix that attention deficit disorder you've accumulated. But logging onto Elden Ring and figuring out what to do next, or stopping your sim from blowing up the oven just seems like too much, and you eventually sink back into your couch and keep scrolling. Don't worry, you're not alone. There's millions of people right now suffering from brain rot. But I'm not the 900th YouTube video to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the saving grace, which is switch off games. Switch off games are basically the game that you need to play when you've just got to relax. You don't want to think about the next upgrade your character needs, or how much health you might need to go back and get before the next level. You just want to play something that has a nice feel to the gameplay, or is fun without requiring a focused train of thought. For you, this might be something like Mario Kart, or an older title that you enjoy revisiting every so often. For example, my main switch off game is Thug Pro, a mod where you can play almost any of the levels from any Tony Hawk game online. For some people, this would seem overwhelming, and that's completely understandable. To master these games takes a while, but for me personally, I've gotten to the point where I can just get into a flow state playing this game, and it's almost meditative in a way. Aside from the gameplay, the goals and focus are still very simple. Get the most points, get the highest combo, etc. It never becomes this overwhelming chore of thinking, what do I do next? You just do. Before I continue, I just want to say quickly that this video is actually sponsored by myself. See, I've been wanting to upload more, but I've been super busy working on this music project, and I just finished up releasing this album and hosting a launch party. If you like electronic music, specifically drum and bass, jungle, rally house, garage, feel free to give it a listen. I'll put it in the description. Anyways, back to the video. There's no real inherent start to when these type of games were made. It's more up to interpretation and preference, if anything. But games that started intentionally keeping this style of gameplay in mind dates back nearly 10 years ago. The first time that I'd ever seen a game that made a mundane task the entire game mechanic was Viscera Cleanup Detail, a game where you play as a janitor cleaning up the mess of different alien attacks. No enemies, no creative endeavors to fulfill, not even multiple ways of going about cleaning. Just a completely mundane task. This concept was interesting and new, and it did get a fair amount of attention.
Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and welcome to Let's Play Viscera Cleanup.
But seemed very gimmicky and fizzled out fairly quickly. Yet, these days, games like Power Wash Simulator and House Flipper are bigger than ever. Recently I was watching a video about simplifying your gaming life, and I really related to what was said. A lot of us feel that we need to keep up to date with the latest thing, whether that be a new phone or movie that's just come out. The same can definitely be felt with the gaming industry, as it's the largest entertainment conglomerate that has something new to offer every day. DLC, loot, events, these are all just modern game designs that keep people wanting to come back to the game rather than just putting in the effort into the core gameplay in efforts to make something timeless. Don't get me wrong, nostalgia definitely plays a part in this, but I do think revisiting older games that you love rather than newer games that you love is a lot easier. I've gone back and played through the King Kong game at least 6 times now, and yeah, I loved it as a kid. It's fairly short, tight gameplay, and has an amazing atmosphere and soundtrack. I also really loved Elden Ring when it first came out, but I find it overwhelming to come back to. I realize these are two totally different games, but a nice short experience versus trying to play a giant game with different gameplay styles, upgrades, and openness just because you have FOMO is not why you should be playing the games. I've been finding that recently going back to older games that I think I would have enjoyed, rather than getting the latest game, has been a lot more fun and a great way to wind down after a big day. To harp on about the quote-unquote experience of games' core mechanics, we need to take a look at indie games. Games like Power Wash Simulator and House Flipper would technically be considered indie games. In fact, any game that's made by a small development team or an individual is considered indie. Sometimes constraints and limitations are what brings out the best in creativity to solve the issue of getting to the end product. Indie games are always battling this issue. Yeah, the games are shorter, there may not be as much content, but the core mechanic, gameplay, and style have all been thought out to try and sell you more on what the developer wants to achieve. I find going back and playing more indie games has actually been really refreshing. Yeah, something like Super Meat Boy can get really frustrating at times, and Pikanuku is a very simple game difficulty-wise, but I don't get as quickly burnt out playing these games. In turn, I can get lost in them rather than overwhelmed. When I was making this video, I wanted to try and think of 3 completely different titles, but they all share the same switch-off style of gameplay. Back in the 2010s, there was a lot more what I like to call chat room games. Games like Club Penguin and Roblox that were great for switching off because you could just chat and there was no real objective other than having fun. You can choose to play the game in front of you, or you can just chill. And for some of us, this was the best way of connecting with our friends after school. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this game at this point, but Web Fishing is a game that aims to bring back the chat room style of game that's been long dead. It's simple, relaxing, and the overall vibe of the game is just super cozy. There's no microtransactions, no complicated upgrade system, just a straightforward game that you can switch off and maybe even chuck a podcast on in the background. And if that's not for you and you want something a little bit more satisfying mechanics-wise, I recommend Old School Rally. This game is purely made for fun, satisfying gameplay. The tracks aren't much to look at, there aren't many goals or replayability aside from beating your best times, and yet, I find myself playing this game quite a bit. It's just one of those games that's easy to zone out with. And lastly, if racing games aren't your cup of tea and you prefer platformers, I recommend Lunistis. It's a nice short game with a really cool art style and a really nice difficulty progression. The platforming and movement in this game is just so satisfying, and the level design can actually be pretty clever at times. The game never gets frustrating, there's only one enemy type, and there's collectibles, but you're never forced to get them to move on to the next stage. Just another great experience to switch off with. I hope that if you've had a similar issue of not being able to actually switch off from the world and finding it hard to relax, that this helps in some way. It's nice to take a break from my normal tangents about video game soundtracks, but if you have any suggestions, I really want to try and push myself this year with uploads. Also, if you are interested, check out my new album, it'll be in the description. With all that said and done, thanks for watching.